Hey everybody, we're going to talk about standard 8 elements D and E in this video, and it starts with the Compromise of 1850 and then goes into several events that happened subsequently that lead to the outbreak of the Civil War. So it's a very tumultuous time, and it starts with the gold rush that you may have heard about in California, especially in the year 1849. If you're familiar with the San Francisco 49ers, they're named after the people that came out in 1849 to find gold. They were known as 49ers. So looking at this map, with that said, looking at this map, you see the land that we got with the Louisiana Purchase. You see all this orangey yellowish color. That's what we got with the Mexican War, and then Oregon up here. We have completed manifest destiny. All this land is now part of the United States. Well, now people are moving out into this land in great numbers, and as such, it starts to become developed, organized into territories, and then the territories will turn into states. Well, keep in mind the big fundamental issue and conflict that's around all this. Are these new states going to be slave states or are they going to be free states? And that's the issue that's really getting complicated as we move forward with this gold rush and then the events that follow afterwards. So keeping that in mind, when California, gold is discovered in California, people rush from the East Coast all the way out to the West Coast because they want to find gold too. They want to get rich. More people come out to California. There's enough people there where it can become a state. And so they apply for statehood to join the United States, California does. And part of their constitution that they come up with says that they will be a free state. They will not have slavery in California. That's what they're proposing when they want to join the United States. Well, here's the problem. You see on the map, here's California. It's a long state. Remember our Missouri Compromise, the bottom border of Missouri that stretches all the way across? Clearly, it separates California, runs right through the middle. Well, you can't have half the state free and half the state slave. So the Southerners are all upset that, hey, California, you want to become in and join a state? Well, you're saying that you're not going to follow the Missouri Compromise line. You're breaking the compromise if California is admitted as a state. We can't have that. That will disrupt the balance of slave states and free states in Congress. South saying we can't have that. Once again, the issue of slavery is complicating the relationship between the North and the South. The sectionalism between the North and South is getting contentious, and it's starting to become a major issue for the United States. So, in order to move forward, in order to let California and other subsequent states come in, they come up with another compromise, and this happens in the year 1850. Now, take a look at this map. You have all these blue slave states, all the green are where free states, no slavery is allowed. This orange states, it's going to be determined by popular sovereignty, which we'll explain that in a second. Excuse me. So, new states are coming in from the land from the Mexican War and manifest destiny. The tension between free states and slave states is becoming an issue. When California wants to come in as a free state, it threatens the balance of power, and we've got some conflict. And so we're going to have another compromise 30 years after the Compromise of 1820 that tries to solve the problem. And here's what the compromise says. California, you'll come in as a free state like you want. Okay, so that's an advantage for the North and not the slave states. All right, so we got to try to keep the balance. So what does the South get? If the North, the free states, are getting California as a free state, what does the South get? They get what's known as the Fugitive Slave Act, Fugitive Slave Law, which says all citizens are required to apprehend runaway slaves and return them to their owners. Meaning, if I am a slave and I escape to the North, it's your job to, if you catch me and come across me, it's your job to catch me and bring me back, turn me back in to my masters in the South. That's what the South gets in concession for California becoming a free state. Because remember, think back to our Second Great Awakening, the slave rebellions, the abolitionist movement. Slaves are escaping. They're wanting their freedom. They're fighting for their freedom, and they're taking their freedom by escaping. The South's getting hurt by this, and so they're going to get the Fugitive Slave Act to help return their slaves. So the Compromise of 1850 so far, California comes in as a free state, no slavery. The South gets the Fugitive Slave Act, which requires you to apprehend a runaway slave and return them to their owner. If you don't do that, you could be fined or imprisoned. All right, so we got a balance going on. California free, Fugitive Slave Act for the South. What else does it say? The Slave Act, the slave trade, excuse me, is abolished. Not happening within the District of Columbia, where Washington, D.C. is. But you can still have slaves. You just can't buy or sell slaves. All right, so the North and South counties both get what they want with that one. So far, the Compromise of 1850 is it's appeasing both North and South. The last part of it, New Mexico, that's land that was acquired with the Mexican cession following the Mexican-American War. It's going to come in as a state as well. So these are the details about the Compromise of 1850. Again, this is basically trying to solve the issue of slavery moving forward that we're not able to do ever since going way back to the Articles of Confederation in our Northwest Ordinance. So that's your details about the Compromise of 1850. Does it work? Not very well. And here's what happens next. Okay, so California, look at this map now. Look and see what's happening. All these pink states, these are your slave states, mostly in the South. Your green states, mostly in the North, but however, going out west. You see how it's starting to kind of encircle the South? The green states are now free states. The South's starting to feel a little threatened, if you will. They're losing the balance between free states and slave states. The South's losing their balance. The South's starting to feel threatened. They don't like it. Okay, so what happens next? You see these orange and the blue right here? This is now territory that we've gotten from Mexico, part of Louisiana Purchase still. There's enough people in Kansas and in Nebraska, these territories, they're wanting to become states as well. Well, clearly the Missouri Compromise isn't working anymore. If California, you remember the line, it went all the way through California, but that's kind of irrelevant now. That's not happening. So since the Missouri Compromise is kind of obsolete now, how are we going to decide the issue of Nebraska and Kansas? Well, they come up with an idea to let's have the people choose. Popular sovereignty is what this is called. Popular sovereignty says, let the people decide. Let them be sovereign. The people, popular. Let them be sovereign. Let them decide. They're the ones that live there. Let them decide if they want to be slave or not slave. Let them vote. We'll have slavery. We won't have slavery. Let's let that happen. And so that's what they try to do for Kansas and Nebraska as these two territories want to come into the United States. Hey, people who live there, you go vote. You say if you want to be slave state or if you want to be free state. Seems like a good idea. It's not. It wasn't. Turned out to be a horrible idea. And here's what's happening. When they announced this is what's going to happen. It wasn't just the people who live in Kansas, Nebraska that went to vote. All sorts of people rushed out to Kansas to convince people to vote for slavery. Excuse me. All sorts of people rushed out to Kansas, Nebraska to convince people to vote against slavery. So it wasn't just the people who live in Kansas, Nebraska voting for it. You had all sorts of outside influences coming in on the slavery side, coming in on the anti-slavery side to convince the people to vote for their side. This is how contentious the issue was. And take a look at this image that you see on the left. You see the two different sides of people arguing about the issue of slavery. We're going to be slave state. We're going to be a free state. And are they just arguing and pointing fingers at each other now? They're putting guns at each other now. The whole Kansas-Nebraska Act, and that was the law that opened up Kansas statehood and Nebraska statehood to popular sovereignty, letting the people decide for themselves. It turned out to be a horrible idea. The Kansas-Nebraska Act, it repealed the Missouri Compromise officially because it's no longer depending on a line on geography. It's letting the people decide, but it also, the issue of popular sovereignty, it led to violence, and it led to death, and it led to further divide between the sectionalism between the North and the South. It did not end up well. What also did not end up well is what's known as the Dred Scott case, the Dred Scott decision. Dred Scott was a slave. All right, so Dred Scott lived in the South where slavery was legal. Dred Scott and his master move up into the North where slavery is legal. Dred Scott, in theory, is no longer a slave. If you live where slavery is legal, you can't be a slave. That's just the way that works. Okay, and this cartoon's kind of showing you what's happening. All right, so Dred Scott lives where slavery is legal, therefore he should be a free man. All right, Dred Scott moves back down south, realizes they're trying to put him back into slavery. He's like, I can't be a slave. I'm a free man. You can't enslave me if I'm free. He ends up suing. His case goes to the Supreme Court. And what ends up happening, take a look at this bottom cartoon. The Supreme Court says that slaves are property. Slaves cannot be citizens of the United States. You can't have property be a citizen. You can't have both. That's not the way it works. Our government, our Supreme Court says in the Dred Scott versus Sanford, the Dred Scott case, that slaves are property. Therefore, slaves cannot be citizens. Therefore, the Supreme Court is saying it doesn't matter where you live, Congress, you cannot prohibit slavery in federal territories. The Supreme Court in the Scott versus Sanford does several things. No African American can ever be a citizen. That's what our Supreme Court says. It also says, never mind your Missouri Compromise that you try to do with a line in geography. Never mind popular sovereignty that you just tried to do with the Kansas and Nebraska Act. The Supreme Court says that Congress cannot prohibit slavery in federal territories. Therefore, slavery is now protected under our Constitution. Our government, with the Supreme Court, says in Scott versus Sanford that slavery is now protected under the Constitution. How do you think the North, who has been fighting for years, reacts to this? Not good. The South, they're saying, yay, we got our way. Slavery is now protected. The North saying, you've got to be kidding me. You can imagine the rift in between the northern and southern sections of the country. That leads us to John Brown. This is John Brown. John Brown is an abolitionist, part of the Second Great Awakening movement, pushing for the abolition of slavery. This is John Brown. John Brown's a militant kind of guy. John Brown likes to fight. John Brown tries to fight and realizes that can't have a civil government or debate. We can't have laws in Congress. We can't settle the issue of slavery peacefully and reasonably. The only way John Brown says that we can solve the issue of slavery is if we fight, take up arms, and defeat the slavery forces. And that's what you see in this image on the screen on the right-hand side. John Brown standing up front. John Brown's got his rifle in his hand. Behind John Brown, you got men holding their guns. You got flags. You see the Confederate flag in the back. You see the United States flag over here. You see some dead bodies on the ground. You see fire and flames over here, death, destruction. You see like a tornado over here. In all this image, you see all sorts of violence and destruction with John Brown holding his rifle at the front. John Brown is going to solve the issue, fight for the abolishment of slavery however he can. And so John Brown plan, what his plan is he's going to lead a group of men, white men and black men. He's going to arm them, give them guns, and collectively they will go and fight to liberate and abolish slavery. That's John Brown's plan. John Brown gets his guns from the U.S. Armory, and Armory is where we keep our weapons, from different places. In Harpers Ferry, Virginia, John Brown and his men go and raid the U.S. Armory. He steals the weapons, tries to steal the weapons, from the United States government and army. You can't do that. That's treason. John Brown is caught. He's arrested. He's sentenced guilty, and he's sentenced to die, executed for treason. And John Brown's like, all right, here's his words. I did not wrong but right. I didn't do anything wrong. Everything I did was right, he says. Now, if it's deemed necessary that I should forfeit my life for the furtherance of the ends of justice and mingle my blood further with the blood of my children and with the blood of the millions in this slave country whose rights are disregarded by the wicked and unjust enactments, then let it be done. John Brown says, I didn't do anything wrong. Basically, John Brown says in this quote, if you have to kill me so that I can further the cause of abolition and free slaves, if I have to give my life to free their lives, let it be done. John Brown's executed. The North sees John Brown as a hero. The North sees him as a martyr. John Brown gave his life for the freedom of slaves. John Brown's a hero in the North. The South sees John Brown as a terrorist. You mean to tell me John Brown was going to give guns and arms to slaves and lead a rebellion to fight to end slavery? The South sees John Brown as a terrorist and got what he deserved by being executed. The North sees him as a hero, giving his life for the cause of freedom. Two different opposite points of view, two different spectrums of the point of view. A terrorist, a hero. Same man, same actions, two different beliefs. That's your sectionalism tying in. You can't have it both ways. He's either a martyr or a terrorist, a hero or a traitor. It further separates the country. You have all these events leading to separate the country, starting way back with the Articles of Confederation, Missouri Compromise, Dred Scott, Kansas-Nebraska Act, Compromise of 1850, the Mexican War, the Wilmot Proviso. All these things that we've been talking about have further caused the separation of the two different sections of the country. All these events are leading and angering the people of the United States and bringing us further and further apart. It's getting violent. Deaths are happening. The country is falling apart over the issue of slavery. It's going to break apart. And it finally happens in the year 1860. The whole Kansas-Nebraska Act thing, it caused American politics and our two political parties to separate, if you will. And you end up with a new Republican Party coming about, or a new party called the Republican Party coming about. The Republican Party, their goal is to basically stop the spread of slavery. That's their main goal. The Democratic Party, the other party, they're kind of split as well on how to, solve this issue of slavery and moving forward. And so you end up with a lot of split votes, a lot of split factions, if you will. And you see on this map with the election of 1860 voting for a new president, you see four different political parties here voting for somebody for president. When you split the vote in those ways, one of them could take a majority, and that's exactly what happened in 1860 when Abraham Lincoln gets elected. Abraham Lincoln and the Republican Party, their goal is not to outlaw slavery, it's to stop the spread of slavery. That's two different things. In the green states you see in the South, Abraham Lincoln was not wanting to take the slaves away from these green states. He just did not want to stop the spread of slavery into the brown states that you see here. That's two different things. He's not wanting to touch anybody's slaves. He just doesn't want more slaves to be added on top. So when Abraham Lincoln gets elected in 1860, it's the final nail in the coffin for the sectionalism that's been happening. It's the trigger that causes the Civil War. Lincoln gets elected, and the southern states, starting with South Carolina, says, that's it. We're done. We're moving on. We quit. The last 30 years, 40 years actually, from 1820, the Compromise of 1820, all the way up to 1860, 40 straight years of conflict and mistrust between the North and South has caused the South to start to secede from the Union. And it's Lincoln's election in 1860 that's the final nail in the coffin for the peaceful United States, and it's the trigger that causes the Civil War, which we will pick up on the next video. Thank you.